welcome back to another episode of Civil Discord. I am one of your hosts here as often as I can be, the notorious BLG, aka Maurice Jones, here down in the People's Republic of Texas. And with me, again, here more often than I am, out there in the People's Republic of California, the supreme overlord of liberty, Amanda. Amanda, how's it going?
It's going all right. We've got, as we'll get into, we've got exciting school board recall news from San Francisco.
Right.
So things are all right. Just recorded an episode this afternoon of Fact Check This with the wonderful Justin, who's also our producer. So yeah,
Hey.
Things are good. Things are good.
Fact check this. So definitely, you guys will have to check that out. Any podcast or episode that Amanda is on is always gold. 100%. It is always gold. So if you ever hear her talking to a better host than me, then by all means, go check that out. I assure you guys to go check that out. Also, we actually just released a little mini episode for you guys that Amanda recorded and that I completely forgot to engineer and upload, and then upload it via my horrible internet out there in Sparklight. So if anybody's working for Sparklight New Wave, I want you to know that you are horrible and I cannot stand you, and that you have a small monopoly on the area and where I live, because I can't go anywhere else to get an internet service provider. But yeah, so if you work for that company, sorry, I don't like them. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the mini episode before you guys actually go back and listen to it.
Sure. So yeah, a quick note on me. So this was up on YouTube earlier this week. We've just got it up on the audio. And I recorded it on Sunday when you were sports balling. And since then, it was basically about Gavin with the good hair extending his emergency declaration indefinitely. The reason that is important is because an emergency declaration gives you unlimited power to give other people unlimited power, regardless of if they're elected or not. So this has been an issue in Los Angeles, as kids have been forced to wear N95s and KN95s in indoors and outdoors. So last week, is that correct? Yes, last week, there was a heat wave in Los Angeles, which I know sounds weird to anyone who's not in Los Angeles, but there was a heat wave. And at least 13 children are reported to have passed out while playing at recess because they had N95s and KN95s. Since then, there has been a slight development insofar as we no longer have an outdoor mask mandate. However, children, I wonder what prompted that deviation. But we still have an indoor mask mandate, and kids are still being forced to wear N95s and KN95s for at least 6 hours a day, except for recess.
Exactly. So Amanda went into depth in all of that in our little mini episode or whatnot. We might as well just call it another episode, just a short episode of Civil Discord. Your weekly dose of radical curiosity. I completely forgot that tagline
totally
at the very beginning.
I forgot, but
it's all gravy. It's all gravy. So definitely go check that out. Because again, anything that Amanda is on is pure
This
gold.
is not always true.
All right. Like the 49ers out there, because she's out there in California, out there searching for gold. The 49ers, they're doing whatever they got to do. But speaking of schools and how they decide to operate, there's actually a great story coming out of San Francisco. I know this may not have been as national as the San Francisco Times thinks it was, but this was a big deal. So San Francisco actually recalled 3 of their school board members for their school district. A whopping 3 of the 7, I believe, that sit on the board.
Well, so they were the only ones. Those 3 were the only ones eligible for recall.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, there's some people are saying, they would have recalled all of them, but just those 3. So yeah, the 3 that were eligible have been recalled.
Contrary to what you probably not what you think it's about, which is very interesting. But these people have been recalled. So, and by a landslide, utterly a landslide. I want to say The highest one recall vote was like 78.2%. The next one was 75%, and the last one was 72%. Which is, those are crazy numbers. Like for 78% of the people who voted, I won't say of your constituents or so forth, but the people who voted to think you should no longer be in office, says a lot about how you were governing during the time that you were in office. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is going on with San Francisco, since it's out there in somewhat of your neck of the woods? Not quite, but I mean, closer to you than it is to me.
Yeah, well, maybe. I guess that's true. Although it's still a hike. Yeah. So, I don't like San Francisco. I know I'm going to get so much hate. I'm not a fan of San Francisco. It's cloudy, it's foggy, and it's expensive. Right. But I digress. It's cold there too. It's not supposed to be cold in California, but so San Francisco is bluer than Los Angeles, and it's also the city with the least proportion of households with children. So it's kind of like the most childless city, if that makes any sense. So school board stuff isn't normally a huge deal.
Right.
However, the school board did some really crazy stuff. Yes, there was controversy over remote learning, but one of the huge controversies was that the school board had intended to drop merit-based admissions and accelerated curricula. So in the name of equity, which is just so, I think you and I would agree, is incredibly offensive to, because what it says is, okay, well, only white people or people of color can't get into these merit-based programs, or can't enjoy this, can't benefit from these accelerated learning options, when a lot of times, especially for poor people, that is your ticket out, is when you can point to a transcript and say, I got into this school, I took these accelerated classes. You're taking that away from them with these kids who don't have any other options, who don't have connections, and don't have the time to do extracurriculars, and you just take that away from them. I get impassioned. But at any rate, so there was an outcry, and there was a recall, and these 3 board members, one of whom had also had some really ugly tweets about Asian families, accusing them of being, and I won't say the word, well, and she didn't say the word either. She accused Asian families of being like house N-words, which is interesting to me, and I credit the guys on the Fifth Column for pointing this out, the Fifth Column podcast, because they were noting how, so this woman is polite enough to not say the N-word, but she's invoking this horrible concept that is incredibly racist, but she's not saying the N-word, so she's not a racist because she didn't actually say the word. She just talked about the concept itself. So these 3 school board members get ousted, and the line that's being parroted around now is this was a right-wing recall. Ladies and gentlemen, there are not enough right-wing people in San Francisco to produce a majority here. All right, this is not a right-wing recall. In fact, there was a guy, there's a gay man who called himself Gabraham Lincoln and made himself the face of the recall precisely to put forward this message that this is not a right-wing effort. And I was reflecting on this because we're seeing, all over the country, in pockets at least, there are these purple states that are going more, I don't want to call this a red movement, but there are more Democrats who are moving away from very radical policies. And for the past few years, Democrats in power were able to convince their voters that if they didn't go along with and echo their most extreme rhetoric and policies, they were racist, white supremacists, transphobe, misogynists. And this is sort of a slow reawakening, I think, for a lot of genuinely liberal Democratic voters who are realizing that they've lost their party. And I was thinking about whether or why that did or didn't happen in 2016, because arguably the same sort of thing happened, right, with making Republicans Trumpy, right?
Right.
So I think there was kind of a barrier provided by the Republicans' enmity with the press. So there was stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? So you're stuck between a party that tells you have to go along with this weird populist sentiment and a press that's like, don't sit with us. We hate you. You're not one of us. So you had less splintering, I think, with the GOP. And also, I think in general, Republican voters are more inclined to cleave to party identity as a means of providing order and systematization, whereas Democrats, liberals are more willing to deviate from that. So it sort of signals what we can expect, I think, in the forthcoming elections too, where you'll see Democrats voting more on the issues, I think, and Republicans will continue to vote on identity, will continue to vote on party ID. But Democrats have shown that they're not, that they're able to not do that, and they are willing to not do that.
Right. It was interesting because when you brought up the Abraham Lincoln, because I was reading through this article and was like, Abraham Lincoln, like, man, what's going on? And the guy, his real name is David Thompson. And he goes, we wanted to show the diversity of the community behind this recall. I knew they were going to say, oh, isn't it just a bunch of Republicans? And I'm like, do I look like a Republican? Like, I mean, it's so crazy that people even thought like, hey, we want to make sure that you don't realize that we want to make sure that you don't confuse this with some Republican thing. Like this is truly the people in this area voting to remove you. And it's very hard to say it's a Republican thing when it's like 78.5% of the people are voting to recall you.
Yeah, no.
And I think that the article talked about, like, it was, let me scroll back up here. It says, Lopez was voted out with 75% of the votes, and then Molinga was voted out with 72% of votes. In total, around 127,000 votes were cast for the latter two, with slightly more cast in the case for Collins. So Collins, it was the one who was voted out with 78.5% votes to say, hey, we don't want you on our school board anymore. And when I was reading this, I won't say I got tears in my eyes, but I was like, oh man, this is exciting. Like people on the school board are being voted out, mainly because you guys know how I feel about public education. And I think it should be 100% privatized. And I think that the government should have zero input as to what your kids are being taught into school. And I feel like public education, I think education so far right now is a bunch of indoctrination camps. Even though I do work for a school district.
Like, you work for an indoctrination camp.
Yes, I do. And I'm very much in there to be able to pose great, thoughtful questions and have discussions centered around things that are very contrary to what most of these teachers are teaching the kids. I mean, there's one class they're reading a book by Trevor Noah. I was like, Noah. By Trevor Noah, like his story about how he grew up, and they talk about different things as far as systematic racism and all these things. And I was just like, it's weird to have that conversation in an English class. Like, I don't know why you would have that in your English language arts class. That being said, how about we have some conversations centered around whatever else? I mean, we had the Fed come up in the conversation. So I'm like, hey, at least that is centered around what we're learning. We're learning about banking. We're learning about the banking system and so forth. And so just being able to see that parents or people just in general in the general area are definitely like, hey, you know what? Let's focus on the issues that truly matter. And one of the reasons why they said they did this recall is because in the midst of the pandemic, they decided to rename about 44 schools in the school district.
Yep.
And the people were like, what are you doing? Like none of this makes sense. Why would you want to rename 44 schools in the school district as opposed to coming up with ways and plans to open our schools back up and to make sure our kids are getting an education. And it's crazy because I believe they voted 6-1 to rename the 44 schools. And then they walked that back and did it, and almost did an about face of like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're going to hold this off. And then the superintendent delayed retirement, and just it went into this long process of things. And it was and so you had a lot of people in the community like, you guys should be focused on other things outside of renaming an Abraham Lincoln school.
They
or
renamed
Paul
Abraham
Revere
Lincoln.
School. Yeah, like
they're not like renaming Stonewall Jackson Elementary.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
This is not Robert E. Lee Secondary School that they're renaming. One of the schools that they tried to rename was, I think, Alamo something. And so they thought it was a reference to the Alamo when really it was named after like an Alamo tree. Things that matter.
Exactly. The names of school matter. And y'all know me. I don't like Abraham Lincoln. But I don't think that renaming a school from Abraham Lincoln to whatever it is is more important than making sure kids get a good education. Okay. And again, I said it once, I'll say it a million times. I am for defunding the Department of Education. Okay. Like, I'm 100% for all of that. And I'm for privatized education because I feel like people learn better. And I feel like there's more incentive for schools to be better when they are directly funded by the people who go there. And so the people who go there directly have an input. I mean, we see this all the time where in Virginia, the people on the school board and the governors are literally saying, you have no right. You as a parent have no right to what your kid is learning in public education. And it's just like, that's a bit backwards. If your tax dollars, the money that is being stolen from you every single time you go and you do something, if that is being used if that's coming from your pocket and you have no input, like that's even more of a theft and extortion as far as what taxes currently are. Because at least most of the time you can at least say, hey, we say vote with your pocketbook, but you can't change. You can't pick up and go to a different school. You can't do all this stuff, so that's why even though I work for public education, I advocate for things like school choice and the school vouchers to be able to say, if at the very least you're going to steal from me on for me, it's a, bi-monthly basis, you're going to steal money from me, at least let me determine where my kids are going to go to school. Like, at least let me figure that out. Because if I'm in an area where the public education is horrible, why do I want my kid going to that school? I don't. So I enjoy stories like this because it is definitely people are realizing that they have more power than what the government leads on. Yeah. And so forth. And it's interesting. I mean, and we are here in Texas, we're going through we're in the middle of voting season, and my wife and I had a conversation about why I choose to no longer vote. But it's one of those things. And she said I was being prideful. So before I move on, I must say this: if I've come off as prideful in explaining why I don't vote, or if I have done something wrong and explain why I don't vote, or anything like that, please forgive me. I'm not meaning to be prideful. I just feel like there's no reason for me to vote. And it has nothing to do, for those of you who are joining us, it has nothing to do with this Trump election or 2020 or me feeling like the election was stolen. It has zero to do with that, and everything to do with how I feel true change comes. So, but all that being said, we're in the midst of election right now. And so people who are really getting out to vote, it's the primaries for our governor. There are people who are running against Greg Abbott and talking about how we need a real Republican out there in office. And so I think people are slowly starting to realize, like, we have somewhat of a power if we do some massive uprising and be able to take out the people who don't serve our best interest.
Yeah. No, so a couple things there. First of all, I want to hear the ways in which Greg Abbott is not a real Republican in people's minds. But
I can tell you right now, he's not a real Republican. But
all right. But no, this was also something that came up at some length on Fact Check podcast, where I was kind of impressed with myself because I came off sounding like a leftist, and I always enjoy when I sound like something that I'm very much not. So it's like Amanda's a neocon now. Oh my god, now Amanda's a leftist. So it tickles me. But I was talking about how there are ways to reform the education system that come short of completely privatizing education. I think because a lot of people get freaked out by that. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I see, like, I want every child to be educated and receive a full education. And maybe this is my programming because I've only ever known societies that provide public education. But for me, I want that to be at least a backstop, if nothing else. That said, the reforms that we need, just basic stuff on the level of funding students, not systems. This is something that Corey DeAngelis brings up again and again and again.
Yes,
fund students, not systems. It's the easiest thing in the world. And if you want to look for an example of systemic racism, like, look no further than the public school bureaucracy.
Yes.
Look no further than zoning that forces kids into underperforming schools, and then either obliterating the possibility of what's called open enrollment, which is where you're able to choose the school in your district to which you send your child, or just sweeping it under the rug and not telling parents. There needs to be a duty to inform, and every single district in the county, every single district and every single county in the country needs to have open enrollment, and then we fund students, not systems, and that way we keep a public education system, but the money is going somewhere where it's going to provide choice, and it's going to provide real enrichment on the level of the individual. I have an analysis about why that will never happen, but we can save that for another time. It has to do with unions and Democrats' fealty to unions and all the rest. But why is Abbott not a real Republican?
Let's see, for the I would say for a number of reasons, but one, his concept of shutting down Texas and not letting businesses open back up and fining people and doing all that. Because I know, was it Young Americans for Liberty when they were having their thing in Dallas? He kind of backed up the city of Dallas as opposed to, he's like, hey, well, let the city do what they're going to do. And even though he had quote unquote opened up the state of Texas, and then there was another lady whose business was who was arrested for opening up her hair salon, and he was kind of silent on that. And then his entire stance on his stance on it's taking so long for these gun rights to be restored to people and so forth. I mean, so there are a bunch of things that he's more Republican than a lot of Republicans out there. But if we're going through what a true, real conservative Republican is, he's not that. I mean, as far as spending and so forth, and then education, I just think, and this could be me being just the ANCAP that I am, as far as like, I think everybody should just be done or whatnot. But he's done a lot of things over the past 2 years that have not sat well with a lot of Texans here, which is true. But I mean, even going back to your point, and here's kind of where I think we may disagree a little bit as far as education, and we agree along the lines of there needs to be some change. And and contrary to popular belief when it comes to me and my views, again, I do not think the government is a light switch. I do not think that the economy is a light switch. I do not think that we should be able to wake up tomorrow and we live in an ANCAP society. I do not believe that at all. I do believe that there has to be some progression towards it, which is why I like what Corey DeAngelis is doing. And I want to say he helps pass stuff in Kentucky where they have school choice, where they fund the child, not the school. Yeah. And it's a big thing because like you said, we have huge issues. The school district I work in is a prime example of this. But so I live in the greater Houston area. So I'm probably about like 30 minutes south of Houston. There's a school district, Katy, in which people move there for the schools that are there. Now, if we talk about people moving there, they also have specific situations as to where it's probably a lot more expensive to live there. And I get if the demand to live somewhere is high, it should be more expensive to live there. Like that. That's just law and supply and demand laws of economics. I get that, but back to your thing of as far as where we see systematic issues or whatnot, the places that are not as funded are minority driven.
Yeah.
They are, because they don't have the funds to get up and move. Now, I'm not saying that they are not able to do that. I'm not saying that all Black people are poor and can't afford to do that. I'm just saying statistically, Black people are not as wealthy as white people. Like, that's just the stat. I mean, if
poor kids are just as smart as white
yes.
kids.
Poor kids are just as bright, just as talented as white kids, you know? Oh, Joe Biden. But I think ultimately, if you fund the child, it gives them more incentive to be better. If I know that this child that goes to my school, that there's money attached to them and their funding and how well they do, I'm probably going to teach a little better. I'm probably going to be more empathetic to their situations and what they want to do. I'm probably going to be able to I'm probably going to have a desire to reach this kid and understand, like, okay, why is it he is the way that he is? Because now if he leaves, that is less money coming to the school, you know, right, regardless of where you live. Now we had a situation in where you literally do not go to school with the person who lives across the street from you.
Yeah, that was me growing up in a lot of ways.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me that your address dictates the level of education that you get. Why should that ever be the case? Why should it not be some sort of choice to say, hey, you know what? I want to go to the best school possible. Your address doesn't choose what college you go to. Your address doesn't choose where you work. So your address doesn't choose a lot of things, but it determines where I go to school. Like that's just backwards to me. It makes zero sense to me whatsoever. Our education system needs to be reformed, and it's very dated. It's very antiquated. It is to the point to where, and I encourage everybody to look up why our education system, why our school day is set up the way that it is, with the times and the bells, and why we teach what we teach in the schools, as opposed to being able to branch out and teach like real trades and so forth. Now, most schools, I will say, are adapting to that and being able to teach. So like school districts, we're teaching entrepreneurship classes, we're teaching trade classes. So like I know the school where I teach, we have a CNA program, we have a welding program, we have programs to where you can go to college for free and then go out and be an operator at the plant and so forth. So we have all these programs to where it's not just, you know, to where we're not just funneling people into college and then going from there. So most school districts are trying to branch away from that, but that's here in specific areas. I can tell you in other probably in other states, it's probably not like that. They just have the basic pipeline to college and then pipeline from indoctrination camp to indoctrination camp, and then moving on, which is what the left has done very well. I'll give them that. But I ultimately think there needs to be reform within education. And I don't think that. And yes, if I woke up tomorrow and the Department of Education no longer existed, I'd be excited. But I know that that's not a good thing, and that education is very important, because the more educated your system is, the more your country is and your people are, the more likely you are to flourish. So there is some correlation to education and wealth of a specific area and country. So.
Yeah, and this is, we really should have done a deep dive on school choices. It was just school choice week too, so maybe sometime we'll schedule that. This is deeply personal to me, because my parents fought so hard to get me out of my the public middle school for which I was zoned, and into another public middle school, which was actually closer to my house and was much better performing. And there was no reason except for district lines. They fought and they appealed and they fought and they appealed, and they lost. And they ultimately ended up spending buttloads of money to send me to a private school, which was the best damn educational experience it made me who I am today as a scholar and as a thinker and as a person. And I'm so fortunate because my parents had the means for that. Right. No one should have to rely on that.
Right.
No one should have to rely on that to become who they are. So yeah, it's deeply personal, but yeah.
And if people rely on it, then stop taxing them.
Right.
Like if that's the case, stop taxing them and allow them to spend the money however they see fit. And I know that this is going to get a little bit off topic, but I saw a quote, and it said, "What is your biggest expense, in life? Think about it. Your biggest yearly expense. Is it your house? Is it your car? Is it your groceries?" And then it says, wrong. It's taxes. So when you think about how much you're taxed on a regular basis, like that is my biggest expense every single year, as far as how much I pay, as far as when it comes to your house and so forth. Like I was like, really puts things in perspective. So I mean, imagine getting your house note back and then some every single month, and now all of a sudden those private schools that seem unattainable now seem a lot more attainable because you're getting your money back. So if I'm not being taxed in these specific property taxes and so forth and everything else, it's these things do become more attainable. So it is what it is. But yeah, so moving on to this lovely, and you guys probably like, oh, they're talking about it again, but it is great. This lovely, great convoy that is happening up there in the People's Republic of Canada, this uprising that is moving forward and is glorious, and that and it is showing how political companies really are, and how the government really does control a lot of what you have, and how you don't really have a say, and you're not as free as you think you are when you live in certain countries. It's pretty interesting. So, and I know, Amanda, you've got some good notes on this. So why don't you take this one away?
I've got a bunch of notes. We might not even get to Durham Report, and I don't even care. That was also lots of notes there. I had to create a separate Google Doc for my Durham Report notes. So
right.
Stay tuned. But anyhow, for those, I like that we have ongoing stories now. It's rare because usually news cycles so fast, but now we are actually following stories.
Yes.
So yes, to give some updates, there was a convoy of truckers who were protesting a mandate, not anti-vaccine, but they're protesting a mandate that requires truckers to quarantine for 2 weeks upon entering Canada if they are not vaccinated. And this convoy really, really upset Sir Justin Trudeau the Brave, Canada's Prime Minister. And sorry, I'm so sorry.
Prime Minister.
So sorry. I'm not sorry though.
That's gold. That is gold. So we have Rachel Madcow, we have the Branch Covidians, and we have Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister. Like, yes, I love it.
I knew I had to say it so that you could have permission to say it.
Thank you.
Because you couldn't say Prime Minister, but then now you can. So
exactly.
Anyway,
it's been out there.
Prime Minister of Canada decided to put pressure on. The Ottawa Police and Justin the Brave told GoFundMe to shut down this fundraising campaign for the truckers. Truckers then moved to Give Send Go. Give Send Go faced a denial of service attack. Then Give Send Go was hacked. And the names of these donors were all released, and people from the press have been calling them, which is interesting. And then the Canadian government, well, I shouldn't even say that. It really is Sir Justin the Brave and then this finance minister, because there are a lot of even Liberal members of Parliament who are against this, have decided to act on this never before acted on National Security Act that I'm sure a lot of people, when this was passed, a lot of people who are against this now probably thought this was a good idea, which just goes to show if you give the state surveillance and regulatory power, it can and will be used against you.
100%.
Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday it will be. And that is exactly the case in basically what's supposed to be an anti-terrorism act.
Mm-hmm.
So Sir Justin the Brave doesn't need permission for the first 7 days, permission from Parliament to do any of the things in this act. Then it's voted on. Then if it's approved, they get 30 days. I'm not sure about the extension processes after that. What they have done is they have frozen. They are freezing the bank accounts, not just of the people involved in this convoy, but of donors and of, in some cases, their families. This is some CCP stuff, and it's estimated.
They care about you, but governments are looking out for your best interest. They are literally freezing your accounts, the money that you have worked hard to earn and that you use to take care of your family, and they are saying, "Nope, sorry, can't access it."
Yeah,
but they care about you.
Yeah,
same people who tell you to lock up in 2 weeks to flatten the curve and all this other kind of stuff. We care about you, care about the great society, care about the greater good, but we don't care about how you provide for your family.
And yeah, exactly. It feels like governments only want you to have as much freedom as they can take away at any time.
Exactly.
They want you to have freedom just as long as they can take away that freedom at any time.
Exactly.
And that's what we're seeing. So there's been some estimates. After 9/11, I think bank accounts of people with terrorist ties, there were 136 accounts that were frozen in the U.S. It's estimated now that this number exceeds that. And that was after 9/11, okay? 9/11. A legitimate terrorist attack where people died. All right, so it's estimated to exceed those numbers now. I do want to point out a few ironies. The first irony is that the Give, Send, Go hacker who released... Isn't it ironic? It's like hacking, but you work for the state. Yeah. That's what you get, ladies and gentlemen. That is content.
Exactly.
So, the hacker indeed works for the state. So there's this guy who says that he has, he helped the state freeze the bank accounts of these civil liberties protesters, whether you like what they're protesting about or not. He helped the state freeze these accounts. He has an advertised history of working with state police and surveillance, and he posts selfies with a Guy Fawkes V for Vendetta mask. Bro, I'm not even mad. That's performance art. That's performance art. I can't be mad.
Do you, boo?
Yeah. Golf claps. Really and truly. Isn't it ironic? And Alanis Morissette is Canadian too.
Oh my gosh. I guess this hacker has never seen the movie V for Vendetta.
Maybe he hasn't.
Ain't no way. That's my new saying. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. You're hacking a private company to assist the government, but you're taking a picture with a V for Vendetta mask.
To assist the government in quashing civil liberties protesters who are protesting the government, forcing them to put something into their bodies.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Another irony that I want to point out.
I gotta share, and I don't, but I'll say, and I gotta share a country with these people, but this is Canada, so yeah, I gotta share a continent with these people. But there are probably people in the country who feel the same way this hacker does, and I gotta share a country with these idiots.
Oh yeah. So there's also the hypocrisy of the give, send, go hack, that information being used to contact these people who were donating, that information circulating, versus you compare that to the way that social media and the press reacted to the Hunter Biden laptop story. Where we can't mention this. We can't talk about it. You can't post about it on Twitter. Why? Because it is private information that was obtained through hacking.
Yep.
So those two circles do not square, which I never got that phrase, because you don't square a circle. It's the entire point of a circle. But they don't square at any rates. I wanted to note a kind of the way that this National Security Anti-Terrorism Act is phrased. So it's going to allow Sir Justin the Brave to freeze these bank accounts, and there's some talk about him being able to freeze crypto wallets. I just want to put out there that is not technically something that anyone is able to do, because you can't freeze a cold wallet. What happens is that Sir Justin the Brave can tell regulated financial institutions not to exchange cryptocurrency. So that should say something about how good it is to be a regulated financial institution. If you're under the thumb of the government already, you can't help exchange private currency and privatized currency, privately, even algorithmically regulated currency into fiat. Really, that's kind of worse for fiat if you look at the way that crypto is going and the way that fiat is going.
Exactly.
But yeah, that you can't freeze a cryptocurrency wallet. This is kind of the difference between saying you can't deposit the money under your mattress at a bank and saying you can't buy anything with the money under your mattress. So the act doesn't do anything to the money in your possession. And in fact, this is why people in communist countries would hide money under their mattresses, because it's safer there than it is in the banks. And now that's true in Canada, because at any time your account can be frozen. If you're the family member of someone who might be peripherally involved in this civil liberties protest. So really, if the state can keep you from accessing your money, it's not your money anyway. I know we talk about this sometimes, that this is, it's really not. It's not your money.
It's not. It's really.
They can cut it off at any time and they can change the value of it. It's not your money.
It's not yours. If I can limit your access to it, what makes you think you own it? Do you own it? No, you don't. I do. And I give you permission to use it. And then I take that permission away.
That's like I take your house key and I say that you can use it as long as you come to me and ask me first. And sometimes I'll say yes and sometimes I'll say no. It's your house.
Right.
It's your house.
It's your house. I've gone in and changed the locks on you or whatnot. So you have to come to me and get a new key or whatnot. But it's your house. It's your house. Okay. So, yep, this key works. You got to come to me and give me and ask for permission. And I may or may not give you the key. But yet it's yours. You worked hard for it. Congratulations. You own it. Yeah.
But again, cold wallet transfers, that's still, of course, there's not a way for the government to get its hands on that. So what this is really doing is this is hurting bigger retailers and regulated financial firms, and it's making the case for more independent exchange mechanisms, which is kind of cool, really.
Whatever speeds up the process
to
decentralize currency. Exactly. If this is what it is in Canada, by all means, let it happen.
Exactly.
I'm all for it.
I love seeing on Twitter, so that the Ottawa police will post things on Twitter that are just patently unhelpful. And we discussed this a couple weeks ago too. Mm. So the Ottawa police Twitter account, basically, have you seen Les Miserables? Do you know? Okay.
Yes. Love it.
Whenever I look at the Ottawa police Twitter account, I can't help but think of the scenes where the police are outside the barricade, like being like, "You at the barricades, listen to this. No one is coming to help you fight. You're on your own. You have no friends." But then it's great But then it's great because the people, then the rest of Twitter just goes, damn their warnings, damn their lies, ratio them in the replies. And it's amazing. So I love seeing that, ratio them in the replies. Indeed. It's so weird. It's so weird how things have flipped, you know?
Oh, it really is. And I saw a post the other day by the great Maj Toure, who is, if there are some people who are my spirit animals, he is one of them. And this is where we definitely get into things where you and I disagree on stuff or whatnot. But I mean, it is what it is. And his thought process was, so if you were out there peacefully protesting and the police officers respond to you with violence, at what point do you say it's time to get violent? Like, at what point do you say, hey, you know what? Let's start doing some things. And I am not advocating for any of this because I don't want anybody to get taken down on YouTube, or I don't want our channel to get any strikes, even though we've only been up for 2-3 weeks.
We're babies.
So I am not advocating for any of this, but I thought it was a great question to ask. You know, at what point do we say, hey, enough is enough? You have to push back in the same force or greater than what they are pushing you. And of course, most of you guys know me. Hey, it don't take a whole lot. Like, I'm ready to, if that's the case, let's kick down a door properly. Let's go against the aggressor who is putting their throat on my neck. It's time to flip the script, and it's time to force their hand, and it's time to say, hey, we will. And again, this is in Canada, so it's harder to do. I'm being honest. It is 100% harder. I mean, not put a number on it. It's okay, because I don't want anybody to say, no, it's not 100% harder. It's actually only 55% harder. Like, no, okay. It is harder to do in Canada than it is to do here in the United States because of said laws that they have in Canada and said non-laws that we have in the United States, aka the Second Amendment, which has been trampled on by so many different ways. But nonetheless, we still have that. And so it's easy to say sitting in the U.S. like, hey, at what point do we do the Canadians who are doing their thing and peacefully showing that they have power, at what point do they respond and say, hey, enough is enough? You guys are going to stop doing what you're doing to me. Same thing in Australia. Like, you're going to stop running me over with a horse. You're going to stop pulling me out of my truck and telling me that I have to do things because this is not okay, you know?
Yeah. And now, to your point, what they're doing is they're able to jail tow trucks who do not tow these trucks.
Right.
I couldn't find a way to end that sentence.
Who do not tow these trucks
without redundancy, and I apologize for that. But they're doing that. You know, even the people who want these protesters' assets frozen, they know they aren't really terrorists. They know they weren't the intended targets of this legislation. Mm-hmm. They know they aren't a threat to democracy. They're a threat to everyone doing what they want them to do.
Right.
But that's kind of democracy, isn't it? The people who support this just want to punish people who are doing things differently. And that is all that politics has become on both major sides today. And yes, I know Canada has a parliamentary system, so it's on both major sides. But right now, politics today is using the state to punish people who are living their lives differently from you. That's all that it's become on the major sides. And it's gross. And if you are supporting these measures, you know that you are not supporting them in the name of civil liberties. And Matt Iglesias on Twitter, by the way, is at least honest about this. He's like, you know, I follow Matt Iglesias because sometimes he's got good stuff, but he says, yeah, I guess I would feel more sympathetic if I agreed with them, like, or if I thought that what they were doing was right.
Right.
That's not what civil liberties are about. It's not about letting people do things when you agree with them. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's what can people do even when you think they're assholes.
Like it's frustrating. And who was it? Let me see if I can find this. I can't remember what the guy's name is. He's a crazy dude. Let me see. Let's see if I can pull it up. I think I may have had it.
As you look, I do want to say this is an important point that arrests.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No.
Just that arrests are expected. We would expect arrests because people are breaking the law. Okay, right. Arrests are one thing. People got arrested during the civil rights movement.
Right.
Declaring martial law and seizing the assets of peaceful protesters and trampling on them with your horses, as we have footage of that occurring. Yes. Someone in a wheelchair got trampled. There's a photograph.
Yes.
That's not okay.
Not okay at all. So that's what I say. At what point do you turn and say, hey, enough is enough? We out here doing what we got to do or whatnot. But it just what you were saying, as far as it's always one extreme or the other. Who can hold the power to force the other side to do what they want to do? It's this tweet that Ron Perlman, I don't know if you guys know him. He's some boneheaded leftist who's an actor, and in essence, he pretty much said, I don't understand why we have to share a country with these losers. Let's go forth and let's do our thing, and they can do theirs. And y'all know me, 100%. I agree with him. And as much as he is I don't want to call him. I'm trying to be nice as far as the name calling is concerned. As ignorant as that man is on issues, and he lives up there on his ivory tower in the soapbox that he continues to be on and whatnot, on everything that he says, he is 100% right. We need to. I do not understand why we insist on sharing a country with people who want to vehemently control our lives, and why we sit there and we allow that to happen. Like, it is no offense, because Amanda, you're out there in California, but if California wants to run their state however they want to do it, why should they have any input to what happens to me in Texas? Mm-hmm. Like that to me makes no sense whatsoever. And it's one of those things like, well, we need to be together and cohesive. Like, why can't we be, and I know we've said this in episodes past, how about we just have a defense agreement between 50 states? And why don't each, let's break up the United States into 50 different territories, right? So 50 different territories, and then each of those 50 different territories can do whatever they want to do, but we all come together as one big territory to defend each other's borders from anybody else outside of our particular pact, right? And then within these said 50 territories, each area can kind of break down into I don't know, let's call them counties. Okay, let's just for lack of a better term, let's just call them a county. And within these counties, you guys are able to determine what is best for you within that county. And then generally speaking, you guys have this specific territory that's broken up into 50 to help monitor a couple of things that you can't do to scale on a county level, okay? Because there are some things that your county may need and my county may need or whatnot, and we want to come together to make sure that all counties are taken care of. And then within those counties, you say, you know what? Hey, even though it's a big county, there are some things, some places within county. I don't know. Let's call them cities. Okay. Within these cities, you guys say, hey, you know what? Your city is different than mine. So how about we operate things under a different scale? And then that way, you don't have any power over me. I don't have any power over you. And then you operate in that manner. And then lo and behold, everybody lives with people who they want to live with. You're governed by people who you want to be governed by. And then you don't have to share specific areas with people who, for lack of a better term, want you dead, because they do. It's understanding that there are people who do not want the best for you. We've shown that because because the great prime minister, I won't use the other
Prime
name, but
administrator.
yes, Justin Trudeau is saying that he's freezing your accounts, but he wants the best for you. But this man is literally freezing your accounts without action of anybody else because of his own volition, because of what he deems you guys are terrorists. And now that, and I can freeze your account for 7 days. And within that 7 days, it gives me time to maybe convince people to vote with me so I can extend this out and so forth. It's all these great powers that people are given without the true consent of the governed. Kind of what Gavin with the good hair was doing as far as his emergency powers. It's all of these things, and I do not understand for the life of me why people want to share a country with the same people who were vehemently opposed to them and want to control their lives. I don't. And maybe that comes off as prideful. Maybe it comes off as crazy. Maybe it comes off as psychotic. I don't know. And frankly, it doesn't matter to me, because which one is going to be worse? We are headed down a path where people who are so diametrically opposed to each other there's no room for civil discord. There is no room for any sort of discourse between the two, to where I mention, if I tell somebody, hey, I don't think Trump was that bad of a president on one area, they will say, oh my gosh, you're a Trump supporter, blah 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 blah, you're racist, this, that, and the other. And then I'm like, okay, but if I turn around and say, Trump was arguably was a horrible president, which he was. I mean, he did some good things and he did some horrible things.
Right.
Horrible things. They'll turn around and say, oh, no. Trump had the greatest economy and this, that, and the other. And you're just some deranged leftist and you must bleed blue and you must be a Democrat. And I'm like, I'm neither. I'm literally neither. And I'm not even purple. Like, they would call me gold and black because of where I fall. But I'm like, it's so frustrating. And the more people the more, I don't want to say I can convince, but the more people who realize that at some point we're going to have to break this up into things civilly, of course. We'll have to break this up to where, hey, you know what? Maybe we can just have our own little areas to where we live and you live, but we come up with a mutual defense pact and we do all these things where we can still trade and we can still do the things that we're supposed to do. We just aren't governed by the same political bodies. Then I think that is the best way out of this, because outside of that, I don't see this ending I don't see this ending well for either side, because of how extreme we've gotten, to the point of people are so blinded that they hack into private businesses for the sake of the government and to force people to put something into their bodies and then take a picture with V for Vendetta mask. Like, that just shows how oblivious you are to true messaging and to what you're truly doing. You think you're doing things for the greater good, and you are not. You're not. Like, it's time for us to take a step back, get off of our high horse, and realize you're not always right. I know the past couple of weeks I've said I'm right 99% of the time, but I've realized I'm not always right. There are things where I'm wrong. Yeah. Yes, no, that only that 1% of the time I was just mistaken. I wasn't wrong. I was just mistaken. So, like, it's one of those things of like, we've got to realize that, hey, at some point somebody has got to be the bigger man, and that nobody will. And I'll give, that's giving people too much credit, but at some point we've got to take a step back and realize, okay, maybe it's not best for us to share countries with these people. Maybe it's not best for us to be governed by somebody who can control my life and can control my assets at the drop of a dime, because I donated money to somebody who does not want to put something in their body, or doesn't want it to be mandated to people in their body.
Right.
Like, some of these people are vaccinated and they're still like, no, don't force other people to do it. Like, allow them to make that choice.
Yeah. So to the second, maybe I completely agree. To the first, maybe I think what you're articulating here is an inability to listen to contrary speech and feel, I hate to use the word, and to feel safe listening to contrary speech. I think we need a revision in the way that we understand the work that speech and conversation, the work done by speech and conversation.
Mm.
And I honestly see the ability for that to happen. I see it happening in these kinds of school board recalls, and these times where people who are, classic liberal Democrats say, no, you know what, I want diversity. I want diversity in programming. I want diversity in where I send my kid to school. I want diversity in who my kids' classmates are. I want diversity in what people choose to put in their bodies, right? Because there are a lot of people on the left who oppose mandates. So I think we're seeing more of a pivot, and that gives me some faith in our ability to coexist, and partly because I want us to have that ability to coexist, because I don't like being surrounded by people who agree with me all the time. It's kind of my thing. It's kind of, if that weren't,
maybe that's why you're living in Los Angeles.
Obvious by my life history. I was an actress, and then I was an academic, and I'm so I'm constantly surrounded by people who don't agree with me.
Right.
So I think certain developments here are promising. I want them to continue. I think partly because we've got so many people who haven't experienced true assault on speech, and then when they experience it and then they realize what the alternative is, usually people like it. Like if people aren't used to, if people kind of take freedom for granted, then they kind of start making demands on other people's freedom.
Right.
And then if there can be a reversal, then I think a lot of times people say, hey, this is kind of rad, actually. Like you saw this in the 60s and the 70s, and coming out of this McCarthyism, you saw people saying, hey, I dig speech. Speech is great. I like being able to say how I feel. And on both sides, there was an embrace of speech and an embrace of dissent.
Right.
So I'm not ready to give up on the 50 states and then some just yet, partly because, as I said, we need someone to have the nukes, and the nukes are really important right now. So,
hey,
yeah.
As long as you allow me to have them, I'm fine.
You can have nukes and F-15s, yeah.
Hey, that's what you need to take on the government. So it is what it is. But that'll do it for today's episode of Civil Discord. Again, your weekly dose of radical curiosity, because I forgot to say it in the beginning, and I will say it multiple times now. Please make sure you follow us on Instagram at Civil Discord Podcast, on Twitter at Civil Discord Pod. Follow myself on Instagram, call me Maurice, and then Ajax the Griff on Twitter for Amanda, as she is very active on those sites. Please leave us a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify, wherever you are getting your podcast. Please leave us a review on that platform if it allows you to do so. And again, as mentioned earlier in the show, we are definitely on YouTube. So if you are watching this, thank you for watching this. As I look into the camera, thank you for watching this. We appreciate you. Please share this with anybody with anybody who you who you believe should be shared with. So your, as people like to say, your communist uncle, maybe your racist aunt. I don't know. There are people who can definitely get along to this. Maybe share it with your ANCAP friends, share it with your communist friends, your Marxist friends, whoever you have or whatnot. Amanda believes that we can all get along, and there's some civil discord there. I, in that manner, is somewhat black-pilled and say, hey, we just need to go ahead and break this thing up. It's been a good 200 some odd year run, and maybe we need to try something new. But again, share the show with a family, with a family or a friend. Do all of that. We will be back again with another episode of Civil Discord. Until then, y'all be easy.
Stay fierce.